Hey, this is Doug DeVitri with the Co-Track Pro podcast. I have a very special guest. I am so excited about this. Susan Guthrie. She's a practicing attorney for over 32 years. She's a past chair of the American Bar Association, a section of dispute resolution. She helps attorneys develop their practice and their brand. And I know that she comes from a good place because uh, she actually works to putting families back together through effective dispute resolution. So welcome, Susan, to the show.
Well, thank you, Doug. I'm really delighted to be here with you today.
So let's rewind to when you first started to where you were now, right? Because I know things have changed quite a bit, not so much with the technology, but the way that attorneys have practiced. Why don't you kind of maybe let's take a step back to where kind of how you were trained, how you got started, and then you started to make a shift to find that there was maybe a more effective way to serving families.
Yeah, and thank God I found the way out. But you're right. I graduated from law school in 1990, so it's actually 35 years ago. And I had not planned to practice in the family law space. I took family law in my final semester of law school because I was already working at an investment bank at the time, and I thought it would be an easy class to get through for my last final semester. And then found I absolutely hated working on Wall Street. I lasted a whopping 9 months there. And lo and behold, I joined a firm in Connecticut and went into the family law practice right away. So, really, my entire 35 years was in family law practice, but I had no experience of it prior to that time. So, for me, when I joined the firm, I was a new associate assigned. I was very lucky. The senior partner and managing partner in the firm was my assigned partner. And he was a good 40 years older than I am. And he taught me how to do what I needed to do. And he taught me what he had always done. And that would be a very traditional litigation approach to family law matters. And so that's what I learned. And I was lucky because in a lot of ways I was good at it. A lot of us go into the legal profession because we're organized, because we can think on our feet, because we can be strategic and all those things. And those are the things that apply to being good in a courtroom, good at negotiating for your client's desires and wants. I will tell you, they're not really the best things for supporting a family that is going through a very difficult transition. But it is the only way I learned how to do it. So it is what I did. And, I kept at it, but I will tell you, it didn't take long before, maybe 5 years in, where I started to notice clients were coming back, right? Like a client I had helped 3 years ago get divorced was back on my office doorstep because now they were fighting about things post dissolution. And that became a very repetitive pattern, right? I'm sure you've seen it, where when people go through a litigated divorce, they then only know how to litigate every problem that comes up in their post dissolution life. So, who becomes the most important person in their Rolodex? I'll date myself those 35 years. Um, their divorce attorney. And so it's great for repeat business, but again, it wasn't great for the family model. So I had to find another way.
And so tell me, what was that other way that you think would, or I guess that you've seen and you've witnessed firsthand, and even coaching attorneys on how to do this to serve the family better?
Yeah, absolutely. There's anything outside of a courtroom, I would say is better than going into a courtroom. But for me, the path that I have found serves my clients best and has served the families I've worked with best is mediation. I've done collaborative law. I'm collaboratively trained, which I think is very important for all attorneys to have that training if they're in family law. But for me, mediation really became the space in which I could see people moving forward in a better way. In fact, my divorce mediation practice was called Divorce in a Better Way, because I truly felt that it was. It was very forward focused, future focused, and very much focused on the helping everyone find the solutions to the problems they were facing without being coercive, which is really what the court system's all about.
Well, there's a lot of money that goes into it. There's a lot of time that goes into it. I know that mental health is a big thing to support, especially when might get dragged out for a number of years. What have you found to be one of the most effective things you've done to help uh, families kind of meet in the middle to make decisions on the best interest of their kids?
The number one thing that they need to understand, and the minute that this sort of breaks through the fog that's going on in their brain, because when people are under all that stress, right, they're not thinking very clearly. So I can tell them this, but it takes a while for it to sink in. But the day they realize that they have all the power between the two of them, that I'm not making decisions for them, that their attorneys aren't making decisions for them, and they're never going to have to let a person in a black robe make decisions for them, but that they have to work with each other to get to those decisions. That's that flipping point. Because when they realize they have the power, but they need the other person, they have to work together to get the decisions, right? They can't beat the other one into submission, nor vice versa, uh, literally or figuratively or in any other way, right? They need the other person to get enough of what they want so they'll agree to what you want. And the minute they get that, it flips a switch and they start working toward, well, I know this is important to you, so why don't we do that? But in return, I'd like this. And that's a totally different paradigm than going into a courtroom and taking the facts and the law and beating each other over the head with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine when the pandemic hit, right, that it was just a complete chaos because normally people would get together in a room, right?
Yeah.
And they would hash things out or make decisions. What kind of role did technology play in bringing people together? And then also, how do you do that effectively when people aren't in the same room with one another?
Well, and those are, really good points. And it's why so much panic ensued in the profession on what was it, March 16th, 2020, right? The world went crazy. I was lucky. I had started mediating online years before that because I had moved. My practice had originally been on the East Coast. And when we moved to the West Coast, I started mediating with people on Zoom by necessity. And so I'd been through all of the ups and downs and the challenges that are presented in that online atmosphere. But COVID was definitely, the thing that kicked it into overdrive for both sides of the fence, I would say, right? Not just the attorneys or the practitioners who panicked because they didn't know how they were going to do what they did without having their client right in front of them,
Hmm.
but also for the people who were going through the process. And here's one of the things that quickly people realized is I talked about those stress hormones that people have rushing through them during divorce and during the negotiations and during their mediation sessions. Sorry, swallowed funny. Um, and during their mediation sessions. But what they quickly found when you're mediating online is your body, your brain just doesn't emit the same level of those biochemical, things like cortisol and adrenaline. So people were actually better able to tolerate the discussions that need to be had in the online process. So one of the things that we found through COVID is that mediations and the negotiation process actually went faster.
Mm.
And the stress level and the conflict level didn't rise up as high because people were in a calmer state. Plus, when you're mediating your divorce in some stranger's office, it's stressful. You just sat in traffic, to get there. You had to get a babysitter for the kids. You had to leave your, assistant managing things back at the office for you. Your boss is wondering where you are and why you left at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. Whereas when you can beam in from your own environment, again, you're just in a much less stressed out state. So for practitioners, it became sort of a balancing act. We had to learn how to do what we did in that environment, learn how to support people when they weren't with us physically, but also learn to leverage the advantages that they had and make them aware of those advantages. And still today, even though we're long past the pandemic, hopefully, people are still choosing in many ways to do what they do, but do it online.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. And it leads to the productivity of the conversation because there's not so many distractions. And really, there's a lot of trends that are happening in the legal field with new technologies that are being rolled out. And we'll talk about some of that. Tell me about, your experience as past chair of the American Bar Association dispute resolution. And what did you see in working with your peers to really find out what are some of the latest trends that family law practitioners need to be aware of? And then how can they stay ahead of them?
It was a really interesting experience because the section of dispute resolution has over 13,000 members. And when you're the chair, you feel like you're having contact with every single one of them. My inbox was full. I was always at events and things that were going on, whether virtual or in person. And so it was really wonderful because I did have that opportunity to speak with both my family law colleagues, but really dispute resolution practitioners, both in family law and other areas and around the world. Because the ABA has such a large role in the legal world, to beyond our borders.
Hmm.
And so for family law, it was very interesting because I think we have, and for my colleagues out there who are listening, I think we have finally moved to a place where those of us who do family law mediation are no longer the redheaded stepchildren in the room. And I apologize to anyone who has red hair. I love red hair, but I'm just using a phrase from my grandmother there. But for years, again, I'm a 35 plus year practitioner. The family law practitioners, because what we do in our process looks so very different from what mediators in, say, civil litigation or other areas, what they do. They just, they tend to work in a different way. We are family law. When you're helping a couple reorganize their family, you
Hmm.
don't have one issue like, what is party A going to pay to party B to resolve this issue? You have the minutiae of right down to how are you going to get your children's clothes from house one to house two, and right, like we have so many details that we have to deal with. And for years, I think that sort of was like there's the dispute resolution world, and then there's what family law practitioners do in the dispute resolution world. And I think we've really moved to a space where, because there was such a huge adoption by clients, importantly, the clients loved mediation. So the ones during COVID who normally would have run out to get an attorney, but
Hmm.
court wasn't available to them, you know what they did? They hired an online mediator.
Wow.
And so the rates of online mediation, divorce mediation, family mediation, post-divorce mediation, all of those things just went skyrocketing up. And what we know about markets, right, is when the client wants something, the providers have to shift. And so,
Sure.
yeah, we're seeing a lot of shift, I think, in the family law market. So I would say that shift to away from traditional litigation and into efficiencies and into what the clients want, a client-centered experience, is by far the number one trend I'm seeing.
Sure. And if you could maybe look at the timeline for what it takes for, let's say, a typical divorce, right? Or just being able to settle on a parenting plan. Many times the hearing can get postponed for a variety of different reasons, and it could stretch out. What would you say the timeline is compared to your traditional litigation type of case versus a mediator involved a case?
Yeah, and so this is a great question because every client asks this question at their consultation. So it's a great question. And I'll tell you what I have always told them in the consultations. Typical lawyer answer, it depends. There's so many different factors, but I can say generally, I was a litigator for a very long time. I would say my average litigated case took at least a year from start to resolution. And those are taking into consideration that 95% of those or more settle, but they don't settle until you've done a lot of back and forth in the courthouse. And that also takes into consideration that you still have that 5% that go to trial that can take years to come to resolution. Once I started mediating divorces, I would say the average dropped down to 6 months.
Mm,
And when I went online, I would say the average dropped to 3 to 4 months,
wow.
right? And that's partially due. I mean, I'm looking at it as a practitioner, so it's anecdotal, but the mediation moves, so if you're in my conference room doing your mediation, we can set those appointments as quickly as you two are ready to keep it moving forward. We don't have to wait for the person in the robe to have 15 minutes of availability on their schedule to hear your case. Or for the other attorney to have an open half hour where they can talk to your attorney. So just the efficiency of being able to move through the matter allows for the timeline to come down and you're not dealing with court delays. But again, when you get online, you now have the efficiencies of time because no one's traveling, all those good things, but you also have the efficiencies of emotional regulation.
Mm,
And we know that the number one thing that drags a divorce out is lack of emotional regulation. When people are upset, and they are when they go through divorce, usually for good reason, that you are going to drag that divorce out.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And there's a lot of, I mean, you got the time, right? And time is money. And when you think about the costs that are associated with typical litigation, we don't have to talk specific dollars. Maybe we can correlate it to a number of apples, right? Like how many more apples do we not have to, process in order to come to a peaceful decision here?
yeah. Well, and with apples, we're definitely talking, right, like a tree's worth versus, a small bucket, I will say. But I actually know some of the numbers. Erin Levine is a good friend of mine. She's the founder of Hello Divorce, and which is the premier online DIY divorce platform. And they keep on top of all of these statistics. So we know that in the United States, the average cost for a litigated divorce or for a negotiated but negotiated through counsel divorce is about $27,000. That's
Oh my
average.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
that's $27,000. Now, that's not the type of divorces. I was in Fairfield County, Connecticut, which is a um, community into Manhattan and was the land of hedge funds back when I was practicing there. So nothing was 20. I mean, your retainer wasn't $27,000. But say take that $27,000 divorce. Let's use that as our number. I would say that divorce mediated could be done for $6,000 or $7,000
Wow.
and have the experts involved that you might need, your financials, your coach, your parenting coach if you need one, etc.
So you're
That's
talking,
not all the mediator.
yeah, no, that's that's pretty significant, and that money, right, could be better spent going towards the child, right? Whether it's their education, whether it's their activities, trips.
Whatever the family needs, right? I mean, you may have a situation where one of the parents was out of the workforce for a long period of time. So it may be that some of that money would best be served rather than going in my pocket, the attorney, going to new training for that parent so that they can go back and get into the workforce. There's a lot of studies that show that parents that are able to re-enter the workforce, be able to bring their incomes back up or get them back on par. That's a better situation for the whole family and certainly for the children. So there's so many trickle downs to it. But that traditional litigation formula, especially since it's based on a billable hour, there's not a lot of incentive to cut down on the hours that are spent.
Mm.
It doesn't lead to a really wonderful feeling of trust and um, support between an attorney and a client.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And one of the things that's really kind of starting to change the way that we work with one another is AI, right?
Yay,
And it's
AI.
this whole it's this whole new discussion where many people don't know what it is, they don't know where to start, they don't know how to use it effectively for these situations. And one of the things we learned by using it with CoTrack Pro is it eliminates some of the emotion, takes some of the emotion out of our communication. What are some of the things that you're finding to where either attorneys, mediators, families can use AI in a productive way?
Yeah, I mean, everyone can use AI in a productive way. So I love the question. Um, the trainings that I do around AI are focused on what attorneys can do with it. But I do really love that you asked what can clients do with it, because I think a good practitioner gives guidance to their clients about what they can do with AI and AI supported tools that may be supportive of the client. It's not just for the attorneys, but one place, absolutely, like if you're talking and you're saying to me that there are attorneys out there that don't know what AI is or aren't using it, they need to get on the train immediately, because the entire infrastructure of the legal system and how we provide services is changing. It's already started, and a good example is discovery.
Mm.
So, the discovery process, right? We send out that request. We get a stack of, well, in the old days, we used to get a stack of documents. Now we get
Yeah.
a full inbox and everything. And then we'd have a paralegal go through it all
Gosh, so
and
much.
highlight it and note what was missing and all of that. Well, now there are programs like Disco and all these others. 10 minutes. It's going to go through all that. You can just type in, I'm looking for all expense or all checks over $10,000 or all expenses that were paid over $10,000
Mm.
in the blah, blah, blah bank account. And it's going to pull that up for you. No longer can you charge a client 10 hours of paralegal time to do that, or to go hunt through it when you need something. So that's just one example of an efficiency, but it leads to the problem for the attorneys, right? Because they're used to billing in the fashion where they get a written report from their paralegal, they go through it. That's not how it works anymore. Your client will well know that the guy down the street uses one of these programs and doesn't
Mm.
charge for discovery review. So that's just, one of the areas, but good attorneys who have integrated AI into their workflows are using it. I use it pretty much from the time I wake up in the morning until I go to sleep.
Wow, that's really interesting. So, what a paradigm shift from number one, moving from being a litigant to a peacemaker,
Yeah.
right? And now, we're not going to charge as much as this before because now we have tools that save us time, right? And attorneys, it's not just a matter of billable hours, but I'm thinking about the stress, right? That you don't have to go through and trying to manage through clients' emotions because the AI is doing a lot of that for you.
Yeah, it's the number one thing. ABA just recently did an attorney survey. Number one thing that causes burnout and unhappiness in attorneys, big shocker here, it's the billable hour. None of us like the billable hour. No, I mean, I was an associate in that law firm until I became a partner. That's how law firms traditionally make their money, right? They work their associates to death and bill for them and double bill and do all those things that law firms do. Um, and that's just going by the wayside. What attorneys need to realize is it's not a bad thing. It's a positive thing, because now, just as you said, they get to focus instead of on that grunt work that
Hmm.
none of us like to do.
Hmm.
We get to focus on being lawyers. And I assume for those that are out there in the litigation trenches doing that work, they like it, but that's not what most of the job is.
Yeah.
And so you can actually raise your caseload because you have less of that back end work to do. You also, instead of charging by the hour, can start charging on the value you're giving your clients.
Wow, and that's amazing because I'm thinking about the value is happy families, right?
Right.
Productive kids, um, so much stress that can relieve or they can relieve. And you've written some books now on really recreating a practice, the practice playbook, and I think you might have even have a copy to,
Yeah.
to show over the video. Or if anyone's listening, we'll make sure that we put this in the notes for people to access. But tell me about what this reinvention of the practice looks like from this mindful book that you've created for your peers.
Yeah, well, and it came out of my year as the chair of the section of dispute resolution, because the other thing that I think is a trend, or at least what I saw among our colleagues in the section, is that, especially in dispute resolution in law, we tend to have a lot of solo and small firm entrepreneurs. It's a field that, unlike many other types of things we might go into, we hang shingles and we go out there. And so we're not only practicing law or mediation or arbitration or whatever we might do, but we're also small business people. And none of us know how to do it. No one ever told us. No one, so we do what I did, right? I learned from that senior partner. I learned how to litigate, but I also learned how to run a law firm. So when I opened up my own law firm, I did it that way. And then when I opened up a mediation firm, I did it that way. And you know what? There's a big difference between a law firm and a mediation firm, but I thought they'd be the same thing. So anyway, so one of the things that I've seen is that colleagues are looking for guidance on how to adapt to this future practice that's coming. And I have found that I love adapting. I love finding the new things. AI gets me excited about the different ways we can use it. New tools like what you have for, families going through divorce. That's the type of stuff. I love that. So I've started writing books, and I have the proofs from Amazon, but I have the flat fee playbook. I've done them in a short format so that they're easy, quick, really practical guides for people. And then I have the thought leadership practice playbook, because frankly, we're not very good at promoting ourselves either. So I have a whole series of them coming out, but they're just really practical, hands-on guides to try and help our colleagues build future focused practices.
Well, I absolutely love that because you're doing it from a generous place, right? Like where your heart is from, and you don't want others to have some of those negative feelings or consequences as a result of doing something that really isn't as productive as one might hope. So, I appreciate you sharing all of this.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that. That's the thing is I'll be honest, and lawyers may not like to hear this, but the world does not need more litigation. We do not need to foster more litigation. We need more mediation. We need more conflict resolution. We need more of what my ADR colleagues do in this world. But if they can't make a living at it, if they can't build a practice that's sustainable, then they go back to the litigation, or they keep a foot in that world because that's how they make money, or that's how they put food on the table. So we have to, if we want to put dispute resolution in a position where it can promulgate throughout the world, we need to make it something that people can do and do sustainably. So that's really a lot of where this is coming from. I want to help other practitioners, because I had to learn it all 35 years of on the fly. And I like to think that I've gotten good at it. And I enjoy helping others, find their way to having those successful practices.
That's really great. I know anybody listening to this is really going to appreciate some of these and take you up on some of these resources that you provided. Susan Guthrie, thank you so much for participating on the Co-Track Pro podcast. Um, we hope to have more conversations with you in the future.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.